The Sourced Podcast. You know, the intro to a podcast is truly how you set the tone. How do you do that? The Sourced Podcast. We'll go with that. This is the Sourced Podcast brought to you by Jiffy Ice Drills. I'm your host, Nate Zielinski. You know, I've caught everything, killed everything. Now it's time to talk about it. This is the truth, the stories, the true perspective, and most importantly, it's what the life is as a professional hunter and angler. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Source Podcast. I am your host, Nate Zielinski. I tell you, super excited about today's podcast. We have an amazing guest. I got Scott, who's a law enforcement DNR agent. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Nate?
Man, I'm great. I appreciate it. So I work with law enforcement all across the country, right? So whether it is on the education side and we work on content, hosting events, obviously just participating, a little bit of all fashions, but I think I work with 7 different DNR agencies. So as a safety for that, you are amongst one of the 7 states that we have here. But, you and I are friends. We share so many stories, and coming off of our winter ice fishing series called Ice Addiction. Today's podcast is focused on the shady, the illegal, the crazy, the nonsense, foul play, everything that happens in the wildlife world, right? And I think that as we look at this, right, and you talk to other people involved in it, everybody thinks that the fishing and hunting industry is this like perfect, nobody does anything wrong world. And unfortunately, there's a lot of shady things that go on, right?
That's right, Nate. You know, it's people think the term poaching, right? They think of Africa. They think the import of illegal wildlife parts. But people would be shocked, really, at what actually happens. You know, in and around our communities that we live in, there is poaching, and there's a lot of it, unfortunately. And
there's so many levels of foul play and craziness. That's what we're here to talk about today. So, you know, coming into this, the big thing that I want to talk about is we came off of Ice Addiction, right? So we have this huge winter series. So if you're watching this podcast, you know what Ice Addiction is. We host this massive ice fishing tournament series, and we literally built this entire series around getting rid of foul play, right? The entire concept was eliminating foul play. So we pre-drill the holes. There's no shelters. We check sleds as you're coming in. So we do everything around it to eliminate all foul play. And people still come out of the woodworks to do things wrong. Now, granted, like you and I talked about, this is a tournament setting. We have, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars at stake. So you expect a little more foul play. And I think everybody in the world saw the news the last couple of years of more and more cheating. And everybody watched this, you know, walleye tournament in Ohio with all this foul play. But nonetheless, everybody thinks it's at a big tournament. And at the end of the day, it is everywhere. So the foul play is everywhere. We're here to talk about it. I want to hear the stories from you. I'm going to explain some of the stories that I've witnessed, and we've been very quiet up until today, right? So in the past 11 years of Ice Addiction, we have not discussed all the craziness that goes on. Everybody's like, man, why do you do this? Why do you do that? And I never open up about it. I'm just like, hey, I need to do this. And people are like, I don't get why you're doing this, or why do you have this rule? So today's the day where we come out of the woodwork and we talk about all the things. I mean, when it comes to Ice Addiction, I mean, we deal with illegal bait. We deal with people sneaking in rods, sneaking in fish, sneaking in crazy stuff, tying lines to transducers, chumming, shoving weights into fish like you always hear about, trying to sneak in buckets. I mean, you deal with literally everything in a tournament setting. And then just in the community, you know, I witness, I live in the mountains, you know, and you hear stories of people baiting bears and illegal guiding, and like all of a sudden when you're in the industry, it's like, it's all you hear about is this craziness. So of that, I mean, how much of your world as a law enforcement, you know, wildlife officer is the foul play versus just the checking license and the maintenance of anglers and hunters?
Sure. Really, our job's kind of like 3 main components, right? We've got biological components of it, you know, license setting, surveys, counts, classifications. We've got education, where we'll go in and do hunter education or teach at schools, et cetera. And then you've got the law enforcement component. And I would probably divide the law enforcement component into a few different things, right? You got just general compliance, you know, keeping the normal guy, keeping him honest, right? Making sure that they have fishing licenses, that they're following the basic laws. You might address the accidental issue, a mistake that somebody's made. Or maybe somebody takes advantage of a situation a little bit,
Yeah.
Shoots out of the window of a truck when there's a nice deer around. But those are the folks that are kind of, they're really actually good folks. They just make a mistake, right? And then there's the legit poachers, the guys that, stand in front of the judge and express zero remorse for their actions, or never take responsibility for their actions whatsoever. Those are the guys and gals that we really are after, and that we want to hammer. And it comes in every shape and size, anywhere from multi-millionaires to less fortunate people. And surprisingly, I find it to be more common with some of the higher end folk. Honestly, it's a lot of times it's a status thing or an ego thing. But this notion of, well, I'm going to be out there poaching for my food. We don't really run into it. Right. There's just so many resources for food out there. If anybody talks to me and says, hey, do you have meat? Whatever. Yeah, we'll get it for you. But it's just bonkers, some of these people. And it's right under your nose, right under your nose. You're out ice fishing on the lake, and the dude in the hut next to you is doing all kinds of stuff. Transport fish back to your car. He's got fish stuffed in all of his buckets and using live bait and whatever else. And it's right next to you, and you're never going to see it.
So as we go forward, we're going to hear all the stories today in this podcast. So coming off of ice addiction, we built the series around the foul play, right? Because there was so much going on, and we built the series. We were confident we eliminated all. We're like, we are good. There's no way it's going to go down. And then we started seeing it, So, you just look at some of the stories. So where a lot of the core of ice addiction is in the mountains of Colorado. So in the state of Colorado, you're not allowed to use live aquatic fish as bait, like a live minnow, above 7,000 feet or on the western slope. So in this state, at some of our venues, you could use waxworms and mealworms, but you can't use a live minnow. And obviously you state, hey, no live minnows. So as people are going on the ice, we're looking for minnow buckets, right? Minnow coolers. We're like, hey, let's see your bucket that. And, you go through a couple events, and we're like, we didn't find any. We're good. And then all of a sudden, I'm on the ice walking around, and we're kind of checking, and I see a guy with his coffee thermos. And I see him open his coffee thermos. He's and I'm like, what's he doing? He's dumping it into his hand. And I'm like, first, as a coffee drinker, I'm like, that is a waste. That is shameful. We should yell at him for wasting coffie. And then all of a sudden, I see it's clear, and I'm like, oh, he's drinking. Maybe he's pouring a shot. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, there's minnows in his thermos, And all of a sudden, you're like, come on, man, just the shadiness. So then all of a sudden, now it's if there is a container that can hold liquid, you almost have to check it because guys are bringing in bait that way. And it's that was an eye-opening experience. So we're I cannot believe people are going through the woodwork to do this, right? And that's where you kind of draw a line. I talk to people because when we say cheating an event, they think we're bringing in, or they think people are bringing in a whole fish, which is illegal, right? But at the end of the day, you come into a tournament with illegal bait, you're dealing with a lot of things, right? So from me as a tournament director, you bringing in live minnows, right? One, you have an unfair advantage. We don't want that. Hands down, major thing, right? So the second you cross over into the gambling side and unfair advantages, that's a major thing, right? So that's a red flag for us. Then you deal with in Colorado Parks and Wildlife law, to where all of a sudden you could be introducing a live fish species into a mountain reservoir that they don't want that. So all of a sudden now you're getting into the whole biological thing, and it's just a can of worms. And I get a lot of anglers hey, that's not that big of a thing. And I'm like, at the end of the day, where's the line, right? It's legal or it's not illegal. In a tournament where we focus on running a very fine line, it's illegal across the board, and you get into all these kind of can of worms. But that's a minor thing that we deal with, and I'm sure you deal with that, in different law enforcement situations.
Sure, that's a situation you run into frequently, is those types of things. But as people get more and more creative in how to conceal things, I had a guy that he would kill elk, and he actually had holes in his bed of his truck so the antler tines would go through the bed of the truck so that you could put a tonneau cover over that so you couldn't see a trophy elk. So there's things like that, but
that's next level. That's really,
A for effort for sure, but
right.
It gets to a point where you don't want to harass every single fisherman and make them pour their coffee out.
Yeah.
And so it's like a fine line of like, how much enforcement do you do in order to detect violations?
Yep.
Because you can't expect or harass everybody to pour their coffee out.
That's it.
But there's somebody with minnows in their coffee.
Yep.
That's a common thing, right?
That's it.
Fish in backpacks, fish in water bottles. We've seen fish hid in all kinds of places, and that's where the observations come into play, right? And so when you're watching these guys and they're doing something, you're like, hey, we watched this guy put 6 fish down his pants or whatever.
Yeah.
Those are the things that's like, it's obvious. You can justify asking those bizarre questions. You ask some other person, hey, you're gonna have to show me what's in your pants, so you're gonna get into you got a problem. But you would be amazed where people hide stuff, I
mean, that's just it.
We've
noticed at Ice Station, you kind of know. And I had a gentleman this weekend who is, always at our events, very trustworthy, person, and somebody that like I have no questions with. And we did a major search on him, and it was just one of those things that they had a lot of gear and a lot of compartments, and we're like, hey, and I had a new person doing the check, so we change up our staffing for that reason, right? So if I have somebody on staff at my tournaments who always does what we call cooler check, which is going through everybody's stuff, they'll build a relationship with these things, and I don't want that. I like a new staff. So every 2-3 events, I put a new person to check coolers, and my whole team's like, "Why are we doing that?" Like, I like that. I joke with them like, "Hey, because you're used to them. I don't want that. I want a new person that doesn't know anybody to where we get a thorough check to where it's very fair for everything." Sure. And I had a new person who didn't know anybody, and he did this check, and this guy's like, "Hey man, he checked me pretty good." And I'm like, "Hey," he goes, "But what's he gonna find?" And he's like, "What's he gonna find in my water bottle or this?" And I was like, "Hey, you have no idea the things that are going on, and it's just crazy how it starts with that, and then it just it unfolds. So you almost have to do those checks, and real quick, because half of our anglers, probably more than that, probably 80% of our anglers, when I say, hey, we're doing a check, right? I could care less about your booze or whatever you are doing on the ice, right? Like, I'm not here for that. Like, go have fun today. I'm just looking for, certain things. And the most people, 80%, are like, this is awesome. Go through my stuff, right? Sure. Because they're in the tournament. They're like, hey, we come to Ice Addiction because we want a fair event. So 80% are like, this is awesome. Go through my stuff. And unfortunately, most of the ones, you're like, hey, we're doing a cooler check. They're like, why?
Yep.
And I'm like, we just want to check your stuff. And they're like, what do you need to see? And then, they don't realize it, but I'm like,
that's a clue.
Well, yeah, now I do want to see your stuff, right? Like, the guy that's like, oh, yeah, and he starts ripping stuff apart, you can almost stop me. You're like, all right, I get it. You're good. Yep. You know what I mean? But the guy that's, like, very hesitant, you're like, ooh, what's going on? So, you see it, and unfortunately, like you said, again, you're not, like, judging people, but you kind of know when things are going on and how they act, and, you know the people you need to check. But it's just crazy, as we talk about it. And, again, from minor violations to major, like the illegal bait thing, it's a major one to me, but in retrospect, maybe it's not the biggest thing, bringing in fish, that type of thing. But the very, very intentional ones that I think is more, I put it towards like theft, right? It's like theft of the event. Last year, when you weigh a fish at our tournaments, right? So you come up with your live fish, we put it in a basket, and you put it in the water, right? I have a staff that is just staring at this tank, right? And we have lots of levels of detection, right? I have anglers on the ice that nobody knows about that are watching. We have people with optics watching. But when you take a fish that has anything wrong with it, right when you put that fish in the tank, right? So you dump your barrel or your basket in the water, and a fish always acts the same when they hit the water. Mm-hmm. If a fish acts different, it's like, that fish didn't seem quite right, So we had an angler that dropped the fish in the tank, and one of the guys in the tank said, hey, Nate, let's just, let's weigh this one special. And, we have a little symbol, so, I get the nod, and those are the fish that we run a wand through, run a metal detector through, we check extra hard. And, with very minor investigating, all of a sudden this fish has batteries in its stomach. This is an angler that sees a very tight niche tournament. They're like, oh man, ounces mean everything.
Yep.
Maybe they didn't bring the right lead or whatever, but literally, I'm sure they emptied out their headlamp and a couple batteries down there. And it's sad because the second you catch them, you you see the disappointment in
Oh,
their
yeah.
face. You know what I mean? And half is, they got caught, and half they're so embarrassed. And I mean, so last year we found rocks in fish. We found batteries in fish. We had a lot. And I think as rumors spread, we saw less of it, right? So as people got busted, as we, kicked some people out and this and that, we saw less of that kind of thing, which is good. So that's kind of why. That's why we're discussing this, and that's why we're not. We don't ever discuss a lot of the foul play because we don't want to give ideas, right? The last thing I want to do is encourage people to be like, hey, here's all the cheating that goes on, you know what I mean? But on the other half, we like to bring awareness to it, to be like, hey, don't do it. Like, we have a very complex team, and we're watching for things. And I mean, it's everything. Like this last weekend, I saw a guy that was putting on a play. Right? So he, at our tournaments, you're allowed one hole, one line at a time. So he's fishing, right? And he looks up, and there's like holes every 27 feet. So he's fishing right here, and he looks up, and he's talking to a friend. Mm-hmm. He's like, hey, Jim. Oh, yeah, I'll bring you the bait. And I'm just like, and luckily I'm just from afar, and I'm kind of looking, I'm like, who's he talking to?
Yeah.
Nobody else answered. And he walks like 4 holes over, and he starts fishing in that hole. So he's now fishing 2 rods. And I'm like, he fishes for 5 minutes, and he looks back in the abyss. He's like, oh, hey, I'll come over. So he was close enough to where everybody around him was like, oh, he's just yelling to his buddy. Not a big deal. And he was working 2 rods and that, So obviously we caught him, kicked him out, gave him a DQ. And it's just funny, though, how, innocence, but yet it's a major violation, and you see this all the way across the board from weights to that. We caught a guy that before the tournament, we're walking around doing our checks, and, a Vexilar transducer that floats in the water. His transducer's like, boom, 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 boom. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, did we get an expansion crack? I'm like, why is this floating transducer moving? And he had 30 foot of line with bait on it. He didn't have a pre-done fish, so he didn't bring a fish in. Yep. But in the morning, in the dark, he just had line on his transducer, threw it down, hoping to, gut hook one with like a dough bait. Sure. And sure enough, a trout bit it and was hooked, and his transducer was moving. So, obviously pulled it in, DQ'd him, and all that kind of stuff. And yep. I mean, it's just crazy. And then we've had 2 major busts in our history, and that's where I honestly, that's what sparked this conversation. So, with the DWR in Utah, so the DNR agency of Utah, we work with the DNR and all their different agencies there, but the DWR is who we work with the most. And within that, you deal with obviously a lot of law enforcement officers like yourself. And we had a couple anglers that were a little more focused. They had past situations going on, and there was fear of things going on. So we really watched these anglers, and they were chumming, using game fish species as chum, which is illegal to use game fish parts in the aid of fishing. And they had a lot of different little things going on, and they were sneaky, right? So they were chumming, and they weren't just like taking a jar of corn and throwing it down the hole. So they had their little bucket of chum, and they would scoop it with a scoop, like an ice ladle, and they would very gently go to their hole, and they would dump it, and they would scoop out ice. So from afar, they were just scooping out ice, and it was like, man, that's good. And how we originally caught them, they caught too many fish, right? Sure. They took it one step too far. So we're sitting there, and people are catching fish, and I mean, this guy is like, boom, 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 and I'm like, man, that guy's a stallion. Like, right. He's catching 15 times more than everybody. So he was catching a lot, so I was like, man, that's kind of weird. So we get authorization through, the whoever the legal agency is. So we had an officer come down, and we're like, hey, let's check that fish. So we gutted that fish, and obviously stomach contents is just overwhelming. So we're like, oh man, there's a lot of bait in the water, So sure. Pretty much a red flag, but we're not going to accuse anybody, right? We're like, who knows, man? Whatever. Maybe he's got a lot of bait on his hook. If the bait's on the hook, it's legal. And so we start watching him, and then we started seeing the ladle thing, and then you go make contact, and at that time we didn't yet. We dropped the camera down the hole, and all of a sudden the whole hole's just full of stuff, and then it escalates, and every situation we handle differently, right? Whether it's a situation where the angler has to win a prize, or something's happened before then, and the list goes on of how you handle certain situations and what degree it needs to be taken to. But it's just crazy what can happen and what they do.
Yeah. The thing that probably surprises me the most is that the people that do cheat, whether it's in a tournament or is cheating, to kill a big deer or something like that, is that they're okay with it. Yep. Like, they're okay with looking at that rack on the wall or that big check and saying, I cheated to get it, but I'm still okay with it on my wall. Like, if there was any sort of shadiness around anything, I did, I would just be disgusted to even look at amount like that and be just constantly reminded. But like, it just doesn't seem to faze them, and even when they're caught, it's when they show little remorse. Then it's like, yep, you got the right guy.
I agree 100%.
Got the right guy.
Yep. Because we've had these situations to where, even in my tournaments, when we bust somebody, sometimes it might not even be a wildlife violation. This is the craziest part of all, because I think everybody watched those guys that cheated, foul play at those Ohio walleye tournaments. But at the end of the day, a wildlife agency, it doesn't matter what agency, right, of all the states in the country, a lot of tournament foul play turns into a tournament thing or a gambling within the state or a lottery or whatever a state does, a competition violation. And a lot of times they might not even be wildlife violations.
Yep.
Chumming, illegal, it's a wildlife violation. You guys can do something about it. Sure. And a lot of this, but like shoving a weight down a fish, it might be a cruelty to animals kind of thing. But at the end of the day, some of these violations aren't a DNR wildlife violation. It's like, and I learned that real quick, because all of a sudden I'm like, oh, you call up a DNR agency, like, hey, we have this going on, and they're like, man, like, I'm happy to help come kick him out, but like,
there's nothing that says you can't put a battery in its stomach.
That's it. Like, is it morally correct? No, but like in a in a wildlife brochure, it doesn't say some of these things. So it's just like, it's blown my mind of what we can do about it, what we can't do about it. And obviously, as a tournament director, we can kick them out, but you want to do more because you don't want them to come back. And that's where, where this kind of story started, was the remorse. Because we have guys that when we approach them and they did something wrong and they're mortified and, there's tears.
Yep.
Again, it doesn't make me like, oh yeah, you can keep fishing then, right?
Sure.
Like, they're done regardless, but at least you're like, hey man, you screwed up.
Yep.
Go figure out your stuff, And the other guys that like get angry at you and don't show their remorse, you're like you said, you're the right guy. You're the guy we don't want here, because obviously it doesn't bother you that much. And the amount of people that have family with them, I think that's probably the craziest, and that's what I want to hear from you. But over the years, how many people we bust in a full-blown violation on both the wildlife side and the tournament side that have their kids with them, or their wife, and sometimes the whole family's involved. Sometimes, they played it off to their kids, like, oh, this is, you know what I mean? But like, it just blows my mind, and I couldn't imagine. We both have kids, and like doing something like that. Like, I've gotten pulled over for speeding with my kids, and I'm like, oh God, I feel like a horrible person.
And it's one of those where it's like, okay, maybe you get pulled over for speeding. That's a great learning lesson with you and your kids of sorry, officer, I was driving way too fast.
Yep.
I need to slow down. If you give me a ticket, great. If you don't, whatever, that's your decision. I'm going to take full responsibility of that. But that's not always the case. I mean, I've had a number of them. I'm dealing with one big one right now involving a number of kids, and it's going to be real messy and real unfortunate.
That's crazy.
And that's a dad that just going to let the kids sink too. I had one of my first big cases, actually. This was out east. It was an illegal elk, and it was an autistic kid who had an elk tag, and dad, of course, shot this elk, and of course, tagged it with this autistic kid's license, and it was very, very disappointing to see this kid or this dad just put this kid into this really difficult situation, especially with kind of a mental kind of issue. But it was very disgusting to see him deal with that. I had another one actually real locally, where the whole family was involved, but it was more or less orchestrated by the father.
Okay.
And so kids are involved. They were grown kids, so they're responsible.
Do better,
But it's like, you offer the father a plea offer of like, hey, you're kind of the mastermind of this whole poaching ring.
Yeah.
If you want to take the hit and let your kids off and, be responsible. Yeah. No, he sent them, and they all took the hit. because he was like, no, you can, I'm not taking all of it for them. They can do it. And I just can't even believe it. Like, it's like, if there was ever an opportunity where my kid was in trouble and I could take the hit for them,
Oh, absolutely.
hands down, like no questions asked, right? Like, yep, whatever you need to do, because I want the best for my children.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just bonkers that people are willing to just sell their kids out.
Throw them under the bus.
Totally. Yep. Just wild.
Oh, that's crazy. Now, over the years, right? So you've been a law enforcement officer for so many years and moved all over the Western United States and done a lot of cool stuff. With that, I want to hear a story. Like, give me one of your favorite stories of the career that you can talk about. I know a lot of this stuff we can't talk about, but give me one that we can talk about.
So this one was pretty entertaining. So we had been dealing with some elk that had been shot, over a course of a number of years. And all we had were arrows. The guy was not a competent archer. But they were a real unique broadhead, and it was like a Walmart special. That's the only place I've ever seen this broadhead. It was a Chinese-made broadhead. It's the only place I've ever seen them before and since. Yeah. And in any case, we get a call asking for, a guy asking for a roadkill permit, and just something was fishy about it. And normally the roadkill process is pretty straightforward. Yeah. So I go up there and I'm chatting with this guy, and he was not necessarily the brightest individual to begin with. And so I get up there, and of course the guy's gone. He's long gone, but there's an elk and it's got an arrow through it. And they left a bunch of the stuff there, a rope and some other things that they're trying to haul this elk out of there. And they get scared off because I'm asking some questions. Yeah. And of course the guy called me. So it's like, well, I got your phone number, dude, here. Yeah. So like, it wasn't hard to figure out, okay, who shot this. So we start getting into this guy, and this guy had just gotten out of prison for manslaughter. He was charged with first-degree murder, and who knows what plea offer they had. So, this at the time was like, this is a potentially a pretty dangerous guy. Yeah. And so we're dealing with this guy, and we arranged to meet him, and he actually meets us up near the where the kill site was, and we don't quite get a confession, but we got enough that we're like, yeah, we're asking some pretty serious questions, and we're asking him to go look at his bow and look at his equipment. And so we decide, okay, we're going to meet this guy at his house. We arranged to go meet him, and we follow him down there. We said, don't make any turns. Like, you go from here to your house. And of course he does. He turns, and he stops at some sketchy gas station, and we're like, okay, is this an ambush? Like, what is this? This is not good. You're not good. Yeah. Not good. And so everything checked out there. You just needed gas. We get to his house, and it's not in a good place, not in a good part of town. And so, we've got several veteran officers that are doing surveillance from the outside and just kind of keeping the scene safe. Myself and another officer, we walk into the house. He's got a whole bunch of pit bulls, which I think were probably being used for dogfighting. Okay. And so it's him and his wife. We go in there, and there's like an 80-inch TV on the wall, and a couch, and that's like the only furniture in the entire place. And so we sit down on the couch, and him and I and my other partner, we're chatting. We're talking about this, and he's like, on the verge of confessing to this whole elk poaching. And he was just super, super concerned that he was going to jail. Like, he does not want to go to jail. Yeah. And we're like, dude, like, it's a fine. Like, you're going to get a ticket. We're going to move forward. It's no big deal. Like, we can literally write the ticket today. It's a couple $1,000s. No big deal. And he's just terrified. And it's like 2 hours into the conversation. And he's just not getting over that threshold. Okay. And my partner, he looks at me, and he reaches over, and he grabs the handcuffs off my duty belt. And I'm like, okay, like, those are my only handcuffs here, bro. And he takes his out of his handcuffs. And mind you, it's like 8 p.m. It's pitch black. Yeah. The front door opens, and he throws our handcuffs out the front door. Throws both of our sets of our handcuffs out the front door. And of course, we've got other officers that are watching this. Yeah. They see handcuffs come flying out of the front door. And in any case, that was enough to get this guy over the ledge.
Just to be like, you're not going to jail.
Dude, you're not going to jail. And so, of course, at this point, he's like, well, I want to go pray with my wife. And I said, okay, that's fine. And so he goes in the back bedroom like, well, this is where we die. Like, this is when we die. I'm thinking, okay, pit bulls are coming out. We're getting shot.
Guns, everything.
I can't arrest him. Like, this is not good. And of course, he comes out, gives us a full confession. We write him a ticket. He invites us to the Broncos game that next weekend to come watch on his 80-inch TV, and he's just as pleasant as can be.
No kidding.
Yep. We ended up donating him an elk or something later on in the season. And,
Get him some meat.
and but you just never know who you're going to meet. But
No kidding.
yeah, that was one of the ones where
Oh, that's crazy.
I really hope my partner knows what he's doing, because
I bet.
I don't, there's no communication between us. Just handcuffs come flying out the front door.
Oh,
But yeah,
I love it.
yeah. So that was pretty fun.
That is good. Now, what on like the confession side and like things like that? I've heard so many stories, but I mean, have there been stakeouts where people like confess without you knowing, and like walk me just like on the bigger bus like that? I mean, is it a lot of the nitty gritty work, or does it come out accidentally? Or I mean, how many times are you guys out in the woods where people don't know it and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so most of the time we know 90% of the story before we go and interview these guys, so it's like we've gathered the vast majority of the evidence that we're going to gather. We may have a search warrant in hand to go and do a search warrant of the house or the property, or to get antlers in the barn or the meat, whatever it is that we're trying to get. And so oftentimes we'll go and interview the people that we're interested to at that time.
Okay.
And most of the time it's sort of, we already know sort of what happened.
Okay.
We're just trying to fill in the last bit or see what they have to say. Like sometimes it's, you kind of can gauge the type of person it is. Is this person somebody who's going to be taking responsibility for their actions, or are they just going to continue to kind of cover up things?
Okay.
A lot of the times it sort of helps us in our plea offering. Like, okay, this is clearly somebody who's not going to be remorseful in the situation. Maybe we're not going to offer them, sort of an in the field plea offer.
Yeah.
And other folks, I've had guys who are like, yeah, you're right. I totally made the wrong decision in here. And so you end up writing tickets a little bit different, right? You got kids just as I got kids.
Yeah.
This is kind of one of the things I often use in my interviews is that, like, right, if somebody you steal a cookie out of the cookie jar without your mom knowing, and you lie to her, right, the consequence is probably twice what it would have been if you would have just told her, right? And so the action of lying generally makes your life worse, right?
Yep.
And so it's like, it's just so much easier to just be upfront, like, because you're not fooling anybody. Like, this is
like, well, I'm here for a reason, it.
Yeah. Very seldom is it that we don't have a lot of evidence already in hand.
Yep.
There's an occasion where it's just like a hunch, and you're going to interview somebody because you're like, something about this situation is weird. I don't really have a whole lot to prove, but I'd like to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
Maybe he did poach this animal or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's not the common situation. So most of the time you've got a lot of evidence in hand, and you're going in and kind of just sort of picking up the last crumbs on the ground to make the case.
That's crazy.
Yep.
So a fun ice addiction one. We've only had a handful of actual arrests, but there was a person of interest, and it had a very long criminal record, right? So it was a lot of things, and it was a mix of like domestic with, true just law and wildlife. So it was like a mess of everything. So it was one of those things that a DNR agency, not here in Colorado, came up to me and they said, hey, we need some help. We assume this person is going to enter your tournament, and we need to keep an eye on things, and we'd like to use you to help us do that. And it was one of those things they presented it as like, hey, you want to help us? And I was like, I guess I can. He's like, I'm saying it nicely, like, you have to. But I wanted to ask. I'm like, hey, man, I get it. And, this officer who is very head of the state type thing, we're great friends now, right? Like, we pass stories, and it's funny because he'll get a good story like you and I have talked about, and he'll be like, Nate, call me on like your private cell phone. He's like, I got a good one for you. I want to tell you what just happened. And I love hearing him, right? Because I'm in that world. I hear it. I'm just like, holy cow, But this particular individual did a bunch of things wrong in a tournament, and they had officers on the ice. So there was an officer around him with a camera in their bucket, right? So we had a female officer who's sitting there fishing 27 feet from the guy with a camera going like straight back. And I mean, I think there was 7 officers in the field. So we have like pictures everywhere, right? Sure. So we have him for like, I think 8 different tickets at an event. So like we got him, and they were talking to the DA. So they're sending this stuff to basically the state saying, hey, like, is this enough? Are we good? Are we good? And then they're like, yeah, hey, as long as once you approach him, as long as he confesses, get the confession said and done, signs, we're good. We make the approach at the end of the tournament, and at that situation, we actually had to end the tournament. So this is very much like that Ohio situation. So most states, for a felony, right, it's a certain value of money that was contributed into that. So in this situation, we had to let an individual place. So we had to wait till the end of the tournament at noon. Noon hit, places are done, 1st through 30th, right? So this individual was very highly ranked in the tournament, so we had to close the scales, announce it. We had to have a witness. So we had to have Weighmaster, myself as tournament director, and multiple witnesses look at the leaderboard and say, it is closed, it is identified. We had to assign the value of their winning. So, hey, first place is this, second place, yada, yada. So we assigned everybody their money, and we said, okay, you are now at that place. So we then had to approach that individual. So this is before the awards, right? This isn't like tournament ends at noon. It's like 12:01, right? We power through all this stuff, get all our signatures, all our certifications. We approach the individual, hey, and we didn't want to do it. It was with the family. So hey, man, if you wouldn't mind, have your family stay here. Let's go step over here, in private. So we were very, very nice about it. You know what I mean? We didn't want to embarrass the guy. And he had small kids with him. So we, took him into a tent, and we just said, hey, here's the situation, right? Here's what we know you did. Here's all this. You are, winning X amount at this tournament. That's a felony, yada, yada. Do you accept this, yada, yada? Do you confess? Absolutely not. I didn't do that. So it was like, we're like, we have you, So he said no. So the officer stepped out, and they talked to like the DA or head of state, and they're like, hey, he won't sign.
Sure.
So we had to then stop the tournament, basically. Like, it's over. Everybody's packing up. And we had to then go back out to all 4 corners of the grid. So in our fishing area, catch fish from all of them and pull fish as samples for a very minor portion of what he was doing was chumming. So we had to catch fish at all portions of the course to prove that those fish didn't have that stomach contents in it, because we had all his fish. He thought we were releasing them. We have a release hole. We actually have multiple holes back there. So if we have a fish in question, they go in a different situation. We keep them alive, so if there's nothing wrong, the fish can still survive and everything. But we had all his fish separated, so we had all that. So we had stomach contents of that. We had to pull fish from all other corners. We then had to drop cameras in like 18 different holes to have a correct study of the lake. And so it was crazy. So by not confessing, the DA or whoever from up above is like, here's what we have to have for evidence. So we had to work hard for a while. Somebody else did awards for me, and obviously by doing that, I was able to disqualify him for the things that I saw him do. So even though he didn't commit to the wildlife crime, I was able to DQ him. So his place immediately went away, and we just backfilled it. So the audience hardly even knew what was going on. So awards went on, all that, but we pulled those data. But same type thing. It was a situation that had he signed it, he would have lost his hunting and fishing license for several years, lifetime, but would have avoided a lot of things. But by taking the money, by saying, if he would have right there, hey, I'm done, he would have got away with it, but ended up getting arrested for throwing a fit and fighting on all able. So we sat there and just kept doing things until we had enough evidence to where they could take him into custody at that point in time because they didn't want him to go. And so it turned in from a situation that was bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to light code that wasn't bad, but went from bad to worse. Drastically worse. It ended up in an arrest in front of his kid and family, all that, just because he was like, absolutely, I didn't do that. No way. And I'm like, dude, even if they get you for a third of the violations today, you're still out of luck. Like, just work with him. And he refused, and just kept getting a hole.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, the folks that just don't, they don't see the connection between what their actions do and the potential consequence.
I mean, that's it.
And it's just, I can't tell you how many people stand in front of the judge and basically, just lie, just blatant lies of, well, what the officer did, none of that was true, and this was just a big misunderstanding. Well, why are you pleading guilty then if this was just a big misunderstanding? And just, the judges, they see this, they deal with criminals all the time. So they know kind of that MO, but just blatant lies in front of the judge. And you're just like, this is just bonkers that he, like we had one guy, he baited a deer into his garage and shoots it into the garage. The neighbors got...
I need full details of this.
The neighbors got the entire thing on film. Literally, the entire thing on film.
Coming in the garage. Does he close the garage or just shoot it like with the garage door?
Well, it came in through like the side door.
Okay.
So you can't actually see the hunter. And shoots the thing with a .22 in the garage. And then the deer runs out of the garage and dies. Right? And then, of course, he comes out and grabs the deer and drags it back in. So it's like...
all on film.
All on film. And no admission. Like, I don't know what happened. It's like... I've had people with extra animals in their trucks. Well, where did this extra antelope come from? I don't know. It was just in the truck.
There.
It's just there.
Really?
Really? Like, either way, you're getting a ticket. Like,
I mean, that's it. Yeah.
Either way, out of more than anything, like, just give me a story. Like,
I mean, that's it.
Come up with something. At least give me a good lie.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just that.
One of the fun parts, is when you do finally get that confession. Oftentimes they become, very emotionally vulnerable.
Okay.
And so it's like waterworks sometimes,
and you get
the tears. And, I've had people sitting in my truck, and I had this one old gentleman. He was probably in his mid-70s, and he shot a pretty nice buck. And, of course, he didn't have a tag, and he used his buddy's tag and tagged it. And I knew what happened. And so I'm sitting there and interviewing him. He just breaks down, just waterworks, just crying. You're like, all right, man, calm down. Like, now I'm feeling bad for this poor guy. It's like, you're all right, buddy.
You're a counselor now.
And it's like, yeah. So you get a lot of that, and it's quite common, right? They become very emotionally vulnerable, and it's like a huge weight lifted off their shoulders when they confess.
Oh, I bet. Living with that,
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
crazy. Now, years ago, you had an elk story. I don't even know if we're allowed to talk about it, so I won't tell the whole story. But of somebody that shot one, and somebody saw it die, and so you guys hung out by the elk, and then they came back to get it later, and they were like talking the whole thing over as they were packing it out while you were listening. Are we allowed to talk about that?
Yeah. No, there's been a bunch of those types of ones,
That's like one of my favorite, just because it was like, you're just standing there. They're just like, here's how you do this. They were teaching somebody, right?
Yeah. We've had a lot of those where like you're in super close proximity. I mean, they get tunnel vision and they're focused on the animals. And I had one where I see this elk kind of walking this fence line. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then I see this truck come around the corner and I'm like, oh, we might have some excitement here. And so I stash my truck real quick and I get out and, you're kind of hustling to try and get into a position where you can watch, but not be seen. And this dude just smokes it out of the window of the truck, and elk runs across the road. A guy smokes it again out the window of the truck. And then they're driving through the forest, where this animal's at. Yeah. Of course, I'm at one point like 20 yards from the guy, and there's no idea I'm even there. And, you just kind of work in close to him and you just
stand there
and see what happens, see what's said and see what kind of conversations go on. And then of course, at a certain point, it's like 7 o'clock, they're cracking beers, the tailgate's down, they've driven all over the place. And of course now carcass tags are at least avoided, even though it was the right guy. But then you just kind of step out from in front of or from behind the tree and just stand there. And you just kind of sit there, see how long it takes for them to notice me. And then their jaw hits the floor and they look up and they're like, huh.
They're like,
I don't know what to say because I'm not sure how long you've been here.
Exactly.
So that's pretty funny. With fishermen, that's real common that we'll do. Especially on lakes that have kind of cliffy shorelines, you can get in real tight to people. I darn near had a guy pee on me one time when I was hiding in a bush, and so that was pretty. I was like, "Woo!" And I don't know if he ever saw me, but I was hidden in a bush watching. We had a real problem at the time with guys fishing with, anywhere from 3 to 15 rods at a time, and so you're sitting there, you're trying to get good surveillance and take photos and observe, and so it takes a long time to document these guys that are fishing. Oh, that
and
guy's
figure out who's got what.
He's got 6 rods. That lady's got 5 rods, and whatever else. But yeah, darn near got peed on once. So that was yeah, we hide in the bushes all the time, and or wherever.
Yeah,
you get some funny stares.
No, it's funny, and like. Obviously, as a guide in most of the regions I fish, I know the wildlife officers involved, but every so often I'll be somewhere. There'll be you guys move around to region to help, and I was guiding at a reservoir, and it was like a cold, brutal day, right? Like nobody's on the lake, and we're out fishing. I was actually fishing with another outfitter up in the region, and so we're fishing, and this other boat's coming. We're jigging for these big lake trout, and there's another boat, and I mean they're like close, and right, I have the big rat boat. People know who I am. We'll get followed just for the sake of they're like, if we're by Nate, we know we're on the fish, right? So I get that fairly common, and we're sitting there, and this boat is like awkwardly close for it being quiet, nobody around. On a busy weekend when there's boats everywhere, I feel like it's a little easier to sneak close and it not be a thing. But like, it was awkward for everybody, and like, but when people are watching me and trying to like tailgate and spot me, like they're intent, they're focused.
Sure.
These guys were like trying to look the other way. And I'm like, that's weird. And we're sitting there, and then the guy I was with, who's an outfitter, he goes, I feel like that's my game board. He's like, I don't know. So we keep fishing, and finally they were like, hey guys, we're with, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, you want to reel up? And we reeled up, and the guy that was with me, he's like, hey, I knew that was you. And he goes, I'm training a guy. We're trying to do this undercover fishing, but like they fished next to us for like 2 hours, just observing, watching what we're doing. And in this case, it was a training, right?
Sure.
So they had a new officer. He's like, but they always have, like, it's never a nice boat, right? You poor guys are always in like a little bit ghetto boat, weird clothing. And I was like, but it was fun. So we ended up talking for like an hour because, he's teaching one officer how to do it and how to do kind of like, not really a sting, but like, an undercover type thing. And, I was like, hey man, I'm like, if you would have stayed, like, cause he asked me, he's like, how close? Was I too close? And I was like, dude, you're way too, like, I get you want to hear our conversations, but like 100 yards, I wouldn't even have noticed you. Sure. And you could have sat all day, and, if we were going to do something shady, we would have done it. But like, you were close enough to where, one, somebody wouldn't want to do anything weird, and two, like, it just seemed weird. You know what I mean? So it was like a great learning experience for everybody involved, and it was funny. But like, it's funny, and I don't think people ever realize that's a part of your job. Is being out there amongst everybody in those type scenarios, and how much goes on.
We had one of those. It was about a week long kind of sting, I guess you could call it, but it involved this guy. He was actually a meth dealer. He's actually in prison for meth. Unrelated to our case, but that was shortly after that. So a lot of times, if they're poaching wildlife, they're doing other things too, right? And so it's not this.
I guess I don't ever think about that.
Yeah. This is not the casual "I made a mistake" guy. This is the guy that's convicted felon in possession of firearm, hunting anything and everything. Hiking down the hill, stashing his gun in places, and so of course, right, we're trying to document, a felon in possession of a firearm. So we're trying to get photos of this guy. If he's killing animals, right, he doesn't have licenses, and so we're trying to get documentation of these activities, and so it involves a bunch of different things. And of course, if a game warden were to drive down that road and check that hunting camp, they're like, well, they know a game warden's in the area. We're going to kind of button things up. Okay. And so, we had this, it was one of those, I think it's one of the Honda Elements. Okay. We were using that as a
little
kind
SUV.
It's like one of those cube cars.
Yeah.
We had one of those things, and we had a hole that was dug kind of behind the camp. So we were like, just stuck in the hole, like that was your prison for the day.
Seriously?
Like you were in the hole, like your head just sticks out. That's it. and that your whole job is trying to document interactions at the camp.
Yes,
And then-
what they're doing, saying.
and of course, you're sitting in this hole, starving to death, and fortunately, it was by a popular trailhead, and so we had one guy. He was kind of an overweight guy, and so he's kind of in his like spandex hiking
Got hiked.
out, and he's like grenading burritos into our hole and trying to, it's like you drew the short stick today, you're in the hole, and so
No kidding.
so that was pretty fun. At one point, we were up and we were up on the actual mountains. We were on an ATV road in a side by side, and
Yeah.
it was myself and another officer. And at the time, I was probably in my early 30s, and
Okay.
I've always looked fairly young for
Yeah.
my age, and he was probably in his early 40s or late 30s, but he was gray,
Okay.
a little grayer, and when we took this guy down, well, we had interacted with the main
Okay.
subject, the suspect in that interaction. And when we took him down, during the interview, that came out of every person on the mountain that he talked to was also a game warden. He's like, even that dad and that kid, he was the game warden. They were both game wardens. So we got a pretty good laugh.
Oh,
out of that
that's
one.
wild.
That, I was the kid in that one since I was early in my career. But
Oh, that's crazy.
all kinds of fun stories.
All right, so now of all the busts and everything you've ever done, what's either the most significant that you feel better as a person for a dangerous person, or what's just the craziest? If there's one last story, what would be the all-time taker? If you're writing your book of life.
Oh man, that's tough. There's been a bunch of them. As far as stories, there's. Oh man, that's going to be a tough one. There's a bunch of different ones. There's a lot of folks that are just opportunistic.
Yep.
And they'll just, if they see it happens to be in their yard, they'll shoot it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And they
just-
just kill it. We had one guy out of Texas that was poaching trophy critters.
Okay.
And he ended up getting a lifetime suspension. That was probably one of the bigger cases I've had.
The woods are a better place with him, but he wasn't a violent guy. Just
No, and
like
that's
to shoot
what's
big
weird.
critters.
Like, that particular person, well, I take that back. He had some other past criminal history with cattle theft and some other things. But, a lot of these folks are generally pretty upstanding folk.
Okay.
We had one that just pled out to, $47,000 in fines. And this guy's a
7,000.
multi-million-dollar, house and property and pretty much a squeaky clean criminal
Dude,
history in
just
the
like
past,
shooting
but
stuff.
just a predator.
Yep.
These guys, it's just any of them that you can get off the landscape is going to be better.
I love that. It's funny because I've talked about this in the past. So I hosted a live feed with Colorado Parks and Wildlife Agency, so the agency here in Colorado. So I hosted a live feed with them, and we talked about that. We talked about in the violation world, right? Like, immediately, before you transport the animal, you have to endorse your tag. Like, people forget, right? And people are so excited. They kill their first animal, they're skinning, and they forget to put evidence of sex on the animal. They're like, oh, I got it on the head. It's like, well, it's detached now. It doesn't work. But so there's like little violations that are like, it's a violation nonetheless, but, maybe the excitement got to you. But there are people that just can't help themselves. And that was a situation that I had in Utah with one of these people that we got on a fishing situation. But, like, they couldn't let a large animal go. Like, it didn't matter if it was spring, summer, fall, or winter. Like, if they were driving and they saw a world-class mule deer, like, they shot it.
Yeah.
Like, there was golf course, inner city, out in the woods, like they just, like, their excitement took over their body and they could not help themselves.
Yep.
And those are the type of people that it's just unfortunate that happens. And I mean, it's like the movies where you see them shooting the mechanical decoys on the side of the road. Like, they just haven't seen a deer their whole life. They're like, I got to do it. You
Yep.
know what I mean? And I think you get all those types,
Yep. Yeah.
So it's just crazy. As we wrap up today's podcast, I want to talk about one thing. So obviously these were the stories. We see it so much in our fishing situation. I've helped out with a lot of different law enforcement officers across the country of things that I see. Obviously, being in the industry, everybody wants to show you pictures. Everybody wants to tell you stuff. So, a lot of times I'm in the know where others don't. So I've worked with a lot of wildlife agencies to help with law enforcement of different criminal cases and things like that. But at the end of the day, the big concept, I think, since we're talking about wildlife officers, our closing statements that I want to talk about is shady things happen all the time. And I think that you go into a lot of interactions with people and you deal with so much of this type stuff, violations, theft, bad people, that I think so many people sometimes go into an interaction with a law enforcement officer on the wildlife side and they're like, oh man, he's just out to get me. By no means. I mean, I think I get more intel on fishing and hunting from wildlife officers that help me create a more successful outing by having the conversations. By I'm like, hey, can I pick your brain? But I think so many people are scared because they hear stories, but they don't realize that you're doing that to people. You're doing that to people that deserve it. But I think that people get worried to even approach or talk to a wildlife officer because they're like, man, I heard that story where you busted that guy. It's like, well, if you're not doing that stuff, you're not going to have that interaction. So I think more than anything, I want to encourage people, have a relationship with a wildlife officer, whether it's a wildlife officer in your area. You go up to a brand new hunt, first thing I do is find it, right? Like I'm going on vacation here in a week to Florida. The first thing I do is I find a conservation officer and I'm like, hey, right? Like I'm not from Florida. I have read the book through and through, but I'm always like, hey, my kid and I are going to go shark fishing. Like, what can I do? What can I do? Like, I read the book. I have all the stuff. But, like, walk me through it. It's unbelievable what a great experience I have everywhere I go by immediately contacting a wildlife officer and figuring things out. So I think that's one step. I encourage everybody, make friends with your local wildlife officer. And I think number two, at the end of the day, you are badged as a law enforcement wildlife officer, for a certain state. You do a lot of law enforcement in general, right? Like there's a shooting, you're there. Like you get called out for that. So I just want to say kudos to you for all that you do. And I guess walk me through day to day what is on that side to finish it off.
Yeah, I guess to kind of get back to your previous point, that 95+% of our interactions with the public are good, positive compliance checks, just basic compliance checks. Or we're just having a conversation about, where they like to hunt, where they like to fish. I mean, I had one guy spent just a pile of points on a doe tag, and it was just such a pleasant conversation. And he was happy as a clam, and it was like, it was just a fun conversation. Yeah. And honestly, one of the best parts of my job is running into the unique people that I get to meet. All kinds of backgrounds, which is pretty cool because I get to hear their stories and, they're out here on their vacation telling me, about the things that they're passionate about. And so it's a lot of fun. But we also kind of figure out, okay, who are the folks that need to be watched? Yep. And unfortunately, it's not me picking on you. It's your behavior is justifying my actions, right? It's your behavior is telling me that I should probably be paying attention to this person, right? Yep. We're trained to observe these types of things, just as hunters are trained to observe the wildlife that they're going after. When it comes to other types of things, right? We back up other local law enforcement, the state patrol or highway troopers and the counties, PDs, depending on where we live.
That's awesome.
All of the law enforcement community is pretty tight knit. And so all of us know each other in our communities. And, just as if I was in trouble, they'd have my back and vice versa. So,
That's awesome. All right, guys, you heard it first right here on the Source Podcast. All the shady, illegal, cheating, poaching, right? The list just goes on and on of things that people do in the outdoor world. Again, it is a minor percent, but unfortunately, we're glad that a lot of those people get called out. Hopefully it ends. I know that for sake of running tournaments on the fishing side of things, I hope I never deal with it again. I know that as my prizes get bigger, as the events grow, it's one of those things that the world is what it is and you deal with it. But we went into this conversation kind of spurked and sparred. There's everything coming from ice addiction, right? And I think more than anything, I think this year we had a major growth of some new marketing and we had a major growth of new anglers. And I found myself defending my style of tournaments more than I ever have. And that's what kind of wanted me to get this podcast. I can't tell you how many people questioned my style events. Why can't we fish in a shelter? And I'm like, hey, if you're wide open 27 feet apart and I have people using minnows, I have people chumming, I have people using 2 rods, I have people shoving weights in fish, I have people bringing in live fish, right? If I catch people doing that when we're wide out in the open, right? Like, no way I'm allowing shelters. I'm not being mean because I'm punishing those unique few, but we do it for a reason, right? We are able to make contact and stop all this foul play because we do it things, and I look at other tournaments, the guys are like, man, you should just let us go do our thing. And like, right? I'm not saying those other tournaments aren't right. I'm more just highlighting if people do it in my tournament, 27 feet apart in the wide open during daylight, can you imagine what is happening where it's a free-for-all, right? Where you check in at the town bar, and they're like, hey, you're supposed to go to this lake. Come check back in 13 hours, right? Like, my head hurts when I look at these other tournaments because I'm like, I deal with stuff every event, and it is 100% controlled. I look at the other ones, and I'm like, who knows what's going on, right? And like, it's sad, but as a tournament director, I see that stuff. So that's what kind of sparked the conversations to talk about all the shady things that go on. Again, as always, feel free to contact us. We can continue on, and if you have more conversations you want us to have with local law enforcement officers, we're happy to have them. But again, Scott, thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thanks,
we love
Nate.
hearing your stories. And again, guys, I'm Nate Zielinski. This is the Source Podcast, brought to you by Jiffy Ice Drills. Thank you so much. Stay tuned. We'll have a lot more episodes coming up.